Hello and welcome to another Restore Live. Restore Live going out on a Monday evening at 6 p.m. I'm going out live on the Twitter channel, also to the YouTube channel. And I'm going to ask people that would come along to watch the stream if you would take the link from YouTube and share it, retweet it on Twitter, retweet the live stream on Twitter, and also to really push it out to people that you know that might be interested in this type of thing. Ben Habib, yet again, thanks very much for coming along to talk about the current circumstances in which the Unionists right around the United Kingdom find themselves in. And really what I wanted to do this evening, Ben, is to talk about the deal that everyone's talking about on the media today, and really to scratch a few surfaces to look into areas that I believe that people should be looking into, and in order that we all understand, the gravity of the situation, and let's say that we're only going to get one chance to get this right, and we can't make the wrong decisions, and we need to ensure that our political leaders, well, they don't make the wrong decisions also. Ben, what I want to do is I want to start off by playing a little clip from Chris Heaton-Harris. Chris Heaton-Harris, the current Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. And, whenever that I seen this little clip, I just wonder, what's in this man's head whenever that he would use such words. So I'm just going to play this, Ben, and we'll come back, and I'm going to look for some commentary from you.
Coax everybody into that place that they come back into the executive, and I'd like to think I will be successful. Beguile everybody into that place that they come back into the executive.
So beguile, to coax someone in a deceptive way, is the dictionary definition of that, Ben. What do you make of that type of language, Ben?
Well, first of all, John, great pleasure to be here. Thank you. I know that you had to move things around a little bit for me, but I'm very grateful for that. Thank you. Well, Chris Heaton-Harris is beguiling. Frankly, he's an enigmatic, beguiling sort of chap, isn't he? He was a member of the ERG. I don't know if they've ejected him based on all their public pronunciations. They, by all their own yardsticks, should have thrown him out of the ERG since he became Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, because he seems to me to be entirely captured by the Northern Ireland office, and more keen, as all these ministers seem to become when they get their ministerial positions, keener on championing nationalist, anti-British policies. I'm just absolutely thrown by Heaton-Harris and indeed his deputy, Steve Baker, who blocked me on Twitter in 2020 because I challenged him over the Irish Sea border. So it's obviously a sensitive point for them. But, these people hold these views, but clearly not very strongly. The minute they get their ministerial post, they're off. And the political line, I think, from Westminster, which is, as far as I can see, John, you've been close to this for much longer than I have. The political line from Westminster is always get the Unionists to make concessions, always give in to the bully boy, which in this case is the EU, Sinn Féin, and the Republic of Ireland, and get the Unionists to concede ground. And Heaton-Harris has just done the same thing all over again. And we just have to stand firm against these people.
Yeah, Ben, you're absolutely right on that. And, you've heard us before talking about it from 1998 going forward, from whenever that the so-called peace agreement was signed. We now know that peace agreement to be what we would call an appeasement process as opposed to a peace process. And we've seen it happening so many times. And, it's getting to the point whereby, we're what else do we do other than to stand up and to stand up strong against these people whenever they're trying to take away our birthright, whenever they're trying to force us out of the United Kingdom. And these people, they call themselves conservatives and unionists. They need to really understand what a conservative is and also what a unionist is. Ben, will we call this screen this evening, or we whenever that we talked about doing this great screen? I'm looking at the DUP7 tests at the minute, and I believe deep in my heart that there is only one test, and the one test
there is only, John, you're so right. There's only one test. I know what you're going to say. There's only one test.
And I derive this from the wording of the Article 6 of the Act of the Union, and that is that unionists from right around the United Kingdom, they should be on an equal footing. You know, no difference between, say, Liverpool and Manchester or London and Belfast is what I believe. Would you like to give some commentary on that, Ben?
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've looked at the 7 tests that the DUP have got, and effectively, if you look at them, they all boil down to one single test, which is Article 6 has to be restored to function. Northern Ireland has to be restored to its rightful place as an equal member of the 4 nations of the United Kingdom. And there's no other way to look at it. And at the very basic, fundamental level, EU laws have to cease applying in Northern Ireland. That's it. And unless and until that happens, those 7 tests that the DUP have cannot be fulfilled.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ben, what I want to do is that I'm going to let some people hear some unheard footage right now. I mean, they may have heard it on the radio, and we like to sort of really clip and keep small clips of what people says whenever they say it so that we can refer back to it at a later stage. Now, I have sitting in front of me here on our screen, I have 3 clips from Jeffrey. Now, I don't be worried about the meme that goes with these clips, because I entitled the meme, and you'll see it in a second, did Jeffrey agree a customs and regulatory sea border? And what I mean by that is that, I mean, the DUP actually have moved in months gone by, in where, say, Edwin Poots would have said that he would carry out checks on the red lanes in Belfast, Larne, and in Warrenpoint. And, you know, and I can remember back to Liz Truss, whenever Liz Truss would have been delivering the reading of the protocol bill, the first reading of it in the Parliament, when she said that the British government would carry out regulatory and customs checks in the green lane. So this proposal, and it says at the top of our screen here, landing zone, fait accompli. Well, what the landing zone is that Doug Beattie from the Ulster Unionist Party, he claimed that the Ulster Unionist Party proposed this landing zone back in 2019, and they sold it to the Americans, they sold it to the Europeans, the EU, that is, he sold it to the Dublin government, and he says that the British government also bought into it. And everything that I see is really consistent going forward with what was in that landing zone. So let's just recap about what a landing zone is before that we move on to these short clips. So the landing zone is that there's going to be red and green channel customs and regulatory checks at Larne, at Belfast, and at Warrenpoint. And we know now that the Inland Revenue has been testing some digital border apparatus, let's just say, with the EU, and they've been doing that for the past 3 months. So we can see the direction of travel in where that they want to go, where they are going to be supplying, and we know they're going to be supplying the EU with some digital data. And going forward, that to me is, and I'm going to bring you back to Arlene Foster's words. She said that is customs and regulatory checks, and customs and regulatory checks would impede the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom. So I believe that no unionists could consider what is on offer and where this deal is actually traveling. So what I want to do is I want to start off by playing some small clips here from Jeffrey Donaldson, and then we'll come back and we'll ask for some commentary on these short clips, Ben.
Want to see progress made rapidly in the negotiations or in respect of the legislation that is currently before Parliament, because we want a solution to this problem so that we can get the political institutions fully functioning again. In respect of the data of Lord Bennion, who is the UK government minister in charge of this, we're wanting to delve into what this means, what is the level of data that will be shared. My understanding is this relates to the proposals in the protocol bill, the legislation before Parliament, for a red lane whereby goods moving from Great Britain via Northern Ireland into the EU single market, so going straight through into the Republic of Ireland, and that this is to facilitate those checks, and that the idea is that goods moving within the UK internal market between Great Britain and Northern Ireland would be free flowing. The border posts, of course, would not be in respect of the movement of goods within the UK internal market. Any checks that would be carried out would relate solely to goods that are flowing into the European Union and their single market. So we have been very clear. Northern Ireland's place within the UK internal market must be respected and protected in UK law.
So Ben, my question is, and you've sort of got the gist of what Jeffrey was talking about there, that there would be red lanes checks going into the EU, and he seems to be saying there that there would be no checks on goods in the green lane. But however, we do know that the Inland Revenue have been trialling a digital border with the EU, and we do know that they've already conceded that they're going to be given the data on the goods coming to Northern Ireland to the EU. So I just don't know how to make sense of this. I just wonder, has the DUP went too far already with what it is that they say that they're accepting? Ben, what's your thoughts on that, what you just heard?
Well, first and foremost, John, there is no solution to the protocol through the protocol. You can't reach an accommodation which restores Northern Ireland to its rightful place in the United Kingdom through the protocol. The protocol is what fundamentally breaches Northern Ireland's position. So the protocol itself has to change. And I wouldn't personally get distracted by green lanes and red lanes. The fact that you're even considering green lanes and red lanes says to me that Northern Ireland cannot be in its rightful place in the United Kingdom. The only thing I'm focused on is, will EU law apply in Northern Ireland? And if the answer to that is yes, if the answer to the question about the adjudication of those laws by the European Court of Justice is yes, they will be adjudicating those laws, then Northern Ireland is not in its rightful place. I mean, can you imagine what the folk in Normandy would think if they woke up one morning and they were told that they were subject to British laws and the British Supreme Court? You'd have Macron up in arms. You'd have all the fishermen in France up in arms. The farmers would be going up and down the Champs-Élysées, smashing windows and so on. It's an affront to any sovereign state to have a foreign court adjudicating in its jurisdiction. So I don't listen much to all these complicated constructs to try and get over the border issue. The only thing that I'm focused on is, will EU laws apply in Northern Ireland, and will the European Court of Justice have a say in how laws are interpreted in Northern Ireland? If there's even a partial yes to either of those two answers, it's not a deal that complies. And it doesn't comply with the 7 tests that the DUP have set, John. It can't. And so when I hear Jeffrey talking about green lanes and red lanes, what I'm hearing is a leader who doesn't want to be seen as a naysayer, who doesn't want to be just chucking everything out. But he was quite clear on Friday that any deal that came forward had to remove the European Court of Justice. He repeated that on Friday. And Sammy Wilson's been very clear about it over the weekend, as have the ERG. And so I think, you know, Jeffrey's obviously, I can't speak for Jeffrey, and I can't put words in his mouth, and I can't second guess what he's thinking. But as a leader of a party of, you know, I'd like to say the biggest party in Northern Ireland, as a leader of that party, he can't be seen as a naysayer. He's got to be encouraging the government to try and find solutions. But I think if and when he sees the text of what Rishi Sunak is considering, he will have no option but to reject it. And I fully expect him to reject it. There is no basis on which the protocol can be acceptable to anyone. Any deal Rishi Sunak comes up with Maros Sefcovic, you know, as you know, who is the negotiator for the EU, will be unacceptable, because Maros Sefcovic's mandate prohibits him from changing the structure of the protocol. He can only play with how it's implemented. And we need a change in the fundamental nature of the protocol. So I just don't see this problem going away overnight. And I think Rishi Sunak, frankly, John, what I'm reading, what I'm hearing, sensing, is Rishi Sunak has already looked over the precipice. He's seen that he's not going to be able to foist this deal on the DUP, and certainly wouldn't get it past 5 seconds of Jim Allister's scrutiny. He's looked over that precipice, and being the, there's only one thing Rishi Sunak is beyond his self-belief, and that is cautious. He thinks he's a supreme brain. He's got all the answers, but he's one thing that trumps his supreme self-confidence is his caution. And he's looked over the precipice and he knows he cannot win that battle. He cannot win that battle. And Rishi has now withdrawn.
Yeah, well, it would be very, very welcome that if they can't get this through, because, as I say, the direction of travel is completely wrong, Ben. And as I say, I mean, if they're going to be giving the EU the data on the Green Lane, and they're already trialling, as I say, with the Inland Revenue and the EU, if they're going to do that, I mean, you cannot reinstate the Article 6 of the Act of the Union. I mean, that cannot
That's horrendous. And it's really insidious, John, because it means that the EU and the Republic have detailed trade information on pricing, quantity of goods, destination, everything of British trade. And they will then be able to inform their own manufacturers, their own traders, wholesalers, and so on, what the pricing is, what the volumes are, and they'll be able to undercut us. And they'll be able to pivot trade. I mean, this is what the protocol is about. It's diverting trade away from Great Britain to the Republic so that they can capture Northern Ireland, and giving them access to that very sensitive digital data was a terrible move by the British government. As critical as I was and remain of Boris Johnson, he never did that. He never gave in to that demand. He may have eventually given into it, but he didn't during his tenure as Prime Minister. And the fact that Rishi Sunak has done it tells you exactly everything you need to know about Rishi Sunak.
And I believe, Ben, that they really need to learn a lesson. And I'm sure that you're now beginning to see this. But anything that they give, if they go to retrieve it back again, then Sinn Féin will threaten to walk away from the peace process. This is what happens. So this is a message to Chris Heaton-Harris, Steve Baker, Rishi Sunak, and whoever. Don't agree anything, because, as I say, then all you're doing is creating complications further down the line with Sinn Féin. They're now saying that the protocol has to stay. Well, they wouldn't they? Because they can see that the damage that it's doing to the entire United Kingdom. And how do you ever satisfy those people? I mean, they're not easily satisfied, let's just say. And Ben, what I want to... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think there's a much bigger threat that's coming around the corner. I don't think Rishi Sunak, being the cautious guy that he is actually going to try and do a deal. He's looked over the precipice, as I say, he's withdrawn. That means nothing's going to happen this side of the election. And it looks like we're going to get a Labour government. That's dead cert, as far as I'm concerned. And Keir Starmer, David Lammy, they've made it explicitly clear that their aim will be to align more closely with the EU. And their aim, therefore, will be for the entire United Kingdom to be in some form of dynamic legal alignment with the EU. And that's defeating Brexit completely. We already haven't got Brexit. Part of the United Kingdom has been left behind, which is what we're talking about. David Lammy, Keir Starmer, their aim is to defeat Brexit completely. They'll get rid of that RSC border, but they'll do it effectively by taking the UK, in all but name, back into the single market. And once they've done that, John, then there'll be a hop and a skip back into the EU. They'll do that for a couple of years and say, well, we're so close to the EU, we might as well rejoin. And whatever people say now about, oh no, that's not the aim, we're not going to go back into the single market, it's too big a ruction for the United Kingdom we've left, it's another generation before we have a referendum. That's all nonsense. These people want to take us back in, and that's where we're heading. So we've got a much bigger fight on than actually just the protocol. The protocol has done what the EU wanted. It's got the British government stuck in the mud, unable to move forward, unable to withdraw, unable to deal with it. And now we're going to get those anti-sovereign voices in Parliament, effectively Parliament remaining in contempt of the biggest democratic mandate it's ever been given. And it's going to try and defeat the will of the people, and we've got to fight on. And that fight, we've got to stand up and have that fight now.
Yeah, Ben, I've heard some commentators talking about what supposedly could be in this deal, and now that we know that the Conservatives have a problem, and you've just spoke about it, I mean, do you think that the Conservatives would actually try in their current form, but through Steve Baker, Chris Heaton-Harris, Rishi Sunak, and go? Do you think that they would try to put us back into the EU single market on a UK-wide basis?
Rishi Sunak can't do anything of any seismic effect. He may technically have a 75 or 76 seat majority, whatever it is, but he's not in control of his party. Rishi Sunak is a man who's cowed by events. He's cowed by the EU. He's crossing his fingers, trying to keep things as steady as he can, hoping that the economy improves, hoping that his standing in the Conservative Party, standing in the country improves, and that he has a fighting chance in 2024. In my view, the Conservative Party is broken. It's incapable of winning an election in its current state, and it is going to get trounced in 2024. I know it's a year and a half away. That's a long time in politics, but the Labour Party would have to do a hell of a lot wrong to lose the next election. So we are going to have a Remainer, in my view, as Prime Minister. We've already got a Remainer as Prime Minister, but we're going to have a much, more strident and bolder Remainer with a majority, probably a very sizable majority that he can command in number 10. And so what I'm doing actually, John, is now getting ready for that fight. I'm getting ready to challenge the and there are things happening which I can't disclose at the moment, but there are things that we've got to fight. We've got to fight Keir Starmer. We've got to fight this move towards regulatory alignment for the entire UK. The protocol is now, it's done its job. It's cowed the British establishment. That's what it's done. And we're sliding back towards the EU, and we've got to stop that slipping.
Yeah, Ben, I had a clip and I was going to save this clip to the end. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play it and I'm going to ask you a question. This is something that you said on the last stream that you and I and Jamie Bryson had done. Let's play this. And I believe that well, if we do want to save the United Kingdom, maybe this is a solution, or not a solution certainly, but a strategy, I would say. So I'll play this clip and you can tell me, do you still believe in what you said?
Pivot and eventually deliver, then we've got to threaten them electorally in England. The Labour Party and the Conservative Party are both antipathetic to the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Neither can be trusted. There's firm support for unionism in England. There's firm support for the values that the DUP hold in England. Those values are very similar to what Richard Tice is standing for and what Reform has, been publishing. So there is a definite overlap there. And the Tories right now fear for their political existence. They see themselves being down at less than 100 seats after the next election. But what we've got to do is make sure they continue to feel the DUP's breath down the back of their neck. And the only way to do that is for Sir Geoffrey and the DUP to come to England and to threaten the Tory seats. Can you imagine, if they're facing less than 100 seats already, how much they would fear the DUP coming in? Because that might render them with only 20 or 30 seats. That doesn't mean the DUP necessarily will win seats in England, but it would be strong enough to take votes from the Tories. And what they fear more than anything is losing an election. So if we want the Tory party to pivot and eventually deliver what their name suggests, which is, being the Unionist party, then we've got to threaten them electorally in England. I still hold by that. I mean, you have to threaten them electorally. That's the only thing that matters. One of the problems Northern Ireland has, as I probably mentioned in the last programme, is that there are no Conservative or Labour MPs from Northern Ireland. And so it doesn't really matter, that all they care about is being in power. So we've got to threaten them electorally. And it's not my decision, obviously, whether DUP decide to become a pan-UK party. But I think I think Sir Geoffrey would be pushing at an open door if it's a big change. It's a big ask. It's like asking, if he's fighting, if the protocol is Kilimanjaro, threatening the Tories in their backyard is Mount Everest. But if you want to win a war, forgive the military metaphors, if you want to win a war, you've got to go out there on the offensive. And I would do it. If I were leader of the DUP, I would be bringing my party to the mainland now.
Yeah, I'm talking to some colleagues that work here at Restore just a few days ago, and whenever we're looking at the scenario in which is developing in front of our very eyes, they are saying to me to watch my language, not to push too hard at people, but I say that the best form of defense is actually
It's
attack.
offense.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and if I hear a word, let me give you an example, Ben, of some words that I've heard in the past few days. Now, we know what the media is like, the mainstream media, but there was a report from Reuters that, say, for example, Jeffrey Donaldson had said that he doesn't want to make the perfect the enemy of the possible. I don't like that language. I don't like that language because what that suggests to me is that there's compromise contained within that language. So I believe that what we should do is that whenever we hear these words, well, then we need to highlight them so that maybe they understand what it is that they just said, even whether they meant it, whether they didn't mean it. We need to be here. We need to be pushing, and we need to be showing that no, this is the wrong language. And as I say, it's more to do with is that once you give the whole experience of the entire process since 1998 is that once we've given something, we never ever get it back again. It's a bit like a tug of war, Ben. And if we lose ground on,
I completely agree, John. The way Unionists saw the 1998 agreement as a peace settlement, Nationalists saw it as a bridgehead for further concessions. And that constructive ambiguity that Blair used to go on about has not done well for the United Kingdom. Like so many things that Blair sold to us as, being better for us is transpired to be rubbish.
Yeah. Talking about constructive ambiguity, and this is for the live chat and for people that would come along in the future. But Jonathan Powell, who was Tony Blair's chief aide, he said on national television on the 20th anniversary of the Belfast Agreement, he said that the Belfast Agreement was written in constructive ambiguity. He says, and if it hadn't been for the constructive ambiguity in which it was written, well, there never would have been a Belfast Agreement. And how, now that we realise that, yeah, it actually was written in constructive ambiguity, because Unionists thought that within the Northern Ireland Act 98, Article 1, we thought that, that there couldn't be constitutional change in Northern Ireland without the consent of the people. But what have we learned through the Supreme Court? Well, they're now saying, well, that didn't exactly mean what you thought it meant. That only means that the consent principle only really it's directed at the final handover. So really, what they said was that you can chip away at Northern Ireland until there's nearly nothing left, and then
but
you can have a referendum.
You can't trust Jonathan Powell or Tony Blair.
Yeah,
they're both Remainers. Frankly, without wishing to cause greater division between Brexiteers and Remainers, no Remainers' view on our sovereign status can be trusted, because in order to be a Remainer, you have to be prepared to cede sovereignty to the EU. Yeah. Von der Leyen is on record as saying the EU is about pooled sovereignty. These people don't hold an independent United Kingdom as an important individual construct. They want it to be subsumed. And they don't really care if Northern Ireland is a stepping stone to getting the UK entirely back in, or whether they rip Northern Ireland out. They don't care. I challenge Jonathan Powell, if he listens to this, to come and answer for what he said in 1998, or Tony Blair. They can't answer for it. They don't really give a damn about the sovereignty of the country, because if they did, they wouldn't be Remainers.
Yeah. Ben, I was listening today on the Radio Ulster there was a guy called Barney Rowan, they call him. He was a journalist here in Northern Ireland, and he was around at the time of the Belfast Agreement, of the signing, and he's now doing reports on what it was that led to the peace process actually coming into being, or the so-called peace process. And it's a very, very interesting listen. And there's one thing that I began to realise is, that I'm not a good fan. I'm not a fan of the Belfast Agreement. Never have been, never will be. And
to put it mildly.
To put it mildly, but I'm saying that. In saying that, something I realised today on my way home when I was listening to that guy Barney Rowan, is that I've weighed up that we've got of peace, and there's been a lot of people that actually is here today, and walking the streets. I mean, if I put it like this, if the guns and the bombs had kept going off, there would have been more people died as a result of the terrorism that was happening in Northern Ireland. So I say that it was that is absolutely it's wonderful that happened. But however, how we see that Belfast Agreement is an appeasement process, and we've been proven right. We're vindicated because we've been saying that this is leading us to somewhere.
But it shouldn't be a process, should it? It shouldn't be a process. It should have been a settlement. That's how it was sold. It was a settlement. It was a peace agreement. And, it recognizes the border. It required the Republic to give up its aspiration to take Northern Ireland back in, to subsume Northern Ireland. And all of a sudden, we want to do some customs checks at our territorial borders, which is our absolute right to put a customs border there. It separates two different countries, two different currencies, two different tax rates, and a whole load of other things. And all of a sudden, it becomes an issue of the peace process being ended. It's absolute rubbish. And, that picture that Leo Varadkar took to the EU summit in 2018 of a bombed out border post, a customs post, suggesting that that's what would happen, and wind the clock on 5 years, and they're telling us, actually, don't worry about the RSC border because we can make it invisible. Well, if you can make the RSC border invisible, make the flipping customs border on the island of Ireland invisible. They're all over the place, John. They'll say whatever they want to say to propagate their agenda. And what we have to do is stay utterly firm and clear-sighted about what we want. And we want the European laws and the ECJ out of Northern Ireland. That's the red line. There's one test. That's it. And if that happens, they can't have their single market. Northern Ireland can't be part of the single market if the ECJ goes, if EU laws go. And as soon as it's not part of the single market, it comes firmly back into the United Kingdom. Once it's firmly back into the United Kingdom, the whole debate about red, green, blue, whatever channels becomes irrelevant. So the only thing that matters is getting rid of foreign laws made by foreign legislature, adjudicated by a foreign court in Northern Ireland. That has to go.
Yeah. Ben, I'm going to go back onto these little clips here. So, and again, we're going to let you hear Jeffrey Donaldson being, he was in an interview. It was nearly an hour-long interview, and I cut these clips from it. But these are interesting things for people to listen to. So here we go.
That the UK government is going to bring forward legislation this week which will see the work on the construction of border control posts at Northern Ireland ports resume.
Well, we are totally opposed to the construction of facilities that are about implementing the protocol. We've made that very clear. There has to be an agreement in a way that respects the integrity of the UK's internal market and Northern Ireland's place within it. And therefore, again, we're engaging with Lord Bennion on this.
Yes.
He's the minister in charge. And my understanding is that the proposed regulations relate to what would happen in the future if an agreement was reached, and are not about implementing the existing arrangements under the protocol, but we're seeking clarification on that.
So on the border checks, which is being constructed as we speak, and it's the British government that are constructing these border posts.
What was the date of that clip, John? Can I just ask, what was the date?
Yeah, Ben, it would have been, let me see. Look, I'm going to say I clipped that late December.
Okay, so, quite recently.
I clipped all of those. Now I didn't use them. I kind of was holding things and watching to see would it become relevant someday. Is the truth. Now these border posts that are being built, and they're being constructed by the British government, Larne, Belfast, and Warrenpoint. I just think that I wonder why that they're doing such a thing. Have you any commentary on what you've just heard there?
Well, I mean, the British government, we know the British government is hostile to bringing Northern Ireland back into the Union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, back into the United. It's hostile to it. We've seen it in various courts arguing vehemently that Northern Ireland is a foreign country. I mean, how can the British government go into court and argue that Northern Ireland is a foreign country, and at the same time publicly pronounce that, well, Northern Ireland is an integral part of the United Kingdom and it's part of the internal market, and the protocol respects that? It's all garbage, and that's one of the great things. If there was any great thing about the Supreme Court judgment that we got, it's that Article 6 of the Acts of Union has been subjugated. It's clear. Whether it's legal or illegal is almost academic. What we've got is complete clarity on what this government has done, and this government should reverse it. They don't. It's the chutzpah that they have it's just mind-boggling that they could go into court and argue that part of their own country that they were elected to govern is a foreign country. I mean, we've got the mother of all battles on our hands, John. We must not underestimate, how big this battle is. These people are not going to turn. Rishi Sunak's trip last week was to see if he could soften Sir Geoffrey up, to see whether he could foist this kind of deal on him. And I do hope that my interpretation is right, that Geoffrey pushed back and he's looked over the precipice and he knows he now can't sell it, and it's dead in the water. But the battle continues. That's not the end of it. That's just, that's just their latest bridgehead has been repulsed. We've got to now take ground. And as you say, we've got to find a way to be offensive.
Yeah. That's absolutely the way I see things. So again, we're going to go for another little clip here. And again, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to put out there to people that these things are being talked about, and really I'm trying to direct people in the way that they suggest that this deal should actually transpire. But however, nothing that they're talking about actually really does anything to rectify the very fact that Northern Ireland is separate from England, Scotland and Wales. It doesn't rectify it. So here we go with another short clip again, Ben.
The key component of that is the creation of virtual red and green lanes, Sir Geoffrey, which would differentiate goods destined to stay and be consumed in Northern Ireland from those using the red lane that will be liable to cross the border into the Republic of Ireland. So that will require the construction of some border posts, won't it?
Well, there'll have to be a means of collecting the information that is required to differentiate between those goods that are staying within the UK and those that are leaving the UK. As I understand.
Without getting on with that clip there would have to be a means to differentiate between goods coming to Northern Ireland and ones going to the EU. I find that a bizarre statement. I don't know whether Geoffrey had thought about that whenever that he said it. And again, I'm doing this, Ben, so that we now know that I'm going to refer to a clip from Arlene Foster, and I put this to Ian Paisley Jr. Some time ago, and I said, well, there's Arlene Foster saying in 2019 that when a reporter asked her, well, what if there was some form of words that was suggesting that maybe there was legislation laid down, but it doesn't have to be used. And it was really pointing towards a border in Larne, Belfast and Warrenpoint. And Arlene Foster said, no, because that would be regulatory and customs checks, EU-inspired regulatory and customs checks, and that would impede the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom. Now, Arlene Foster was absolutely spot on with that assessment that it would impede the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom. And there we had Geoffrey saying, well, there has to be a means of differentiating between the goods. So therefore, digital data is basically what he was saying. Yeah, that is a possibility. Now the worry for me is that once you concede these things, you don't get them back again.
You don't get them back. And the practical point I just want to intercede, if I may, for a second, John, is the vast majority of goods that go from Great Britain to Northern Ireland are destined for Northern Ireland. They're not destined for the Republic. And the vast majority of goods that go from Northern Ireland to the Republic are manufactured in Northern Ireland. They're not manufactured in Great Britain. And there's a brilliant chap, I don't know if you've come across him, Dennis Cooper, Dr. Dennis Cooper. Do you know who I mean? And he puts out emails every day. He's almost more ferocious a campaigner than I am, at least by email. He needs to get on Twitter or something. But he sends out emails every day. And the drum that he bangs is that we need export controls for goods moving from Northern Ireland into the Republic. It would be a much easier way to do it. There's many fewer goods moving from Northern Ireland to the Republic than there are from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And that's the issue that the EU has. The EU has issues on goods moving from Northern Ireland to the Republic. So why the hell are we looking at goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland? It's completely missing the point. And Dennis Cooper's spot on. I hope Dennis Cooper watches this program. He needs to get more air on his brilliant suggestion that the British government should voluntarily implement export checks on goods moving from Northern Ireland to the Republic, and that would be the end of the EU's concerns about its precious single market.
Definitely a good point there, Ben. Ben, so another thing that I really wanted to talk about here was that I did hear on the media, they put stuff into the public domain in order that they see maybe what the reaction of people is. Yeah. And one of the things that I heard just a few days ago was that, and I think Jamie Brayson will be very, very happy about this, but we're talking about the document that the Centre for the Union had produced, and that was through Jamie and Ethan Thoburn. And one of the things that they had suggested in that, and I believe that's a good solution to solve the problem, by the way, whereby that, a visionary, as I said, visualize a tunnel. The goods could be put into this tunnel, this imaginary tunnel, and all goods going to the EU feed down that tunnel, and the hauliers, what they do is they make their declarations at the tunnel point, and therefore any goods moving within the United Kingdom doesn't have to have checks whatsoever. Now, I did hear them actually saying that, and these are the people, there was a guy from RTE, as Tony Connolly, I think that is, they call him, and he seems to get a lot of information from the EU side of things. And then there's people here in Northern Ireland that seem to be getting information from the BBC through maybe the British government into things. And one of the things that I heard talked about was that really that what about an opt-in scheme, an opt-in scheme to trade with the EU. Now, that was in the Centre for the Union's proposals, I have to say. So I don't know, maybe they're now starting to realise that they can't do this deal because it's just going to be impossible for them to do it. And they're now beginning to look at solutions that really will satisfy the needs of everyone, not just this one side.
Who's they? Who do you mean by they?
Well, I'm talking about both the British government and the EU, because let's face it, right now they're one and the same.
The EU's not looking at it.
Yeah.
Let me just reiterate, Maros Sefcovic's mandate is to find a solution through the implementation of the protocol. He is expressly prohibited from changing the terms of the protocol. And that means you cannot get rid of the European law aspect. And in the absence of getting rid of European law, everything else, for me anyway, there may be viewers and other unionists who've got different views, but I believe I'm correct that in the absence of getting rid of EU law in Northern Ireland, you haven't solved the problem. EU law has to be removed in its entirety from Northern Ireland.
Yeah, 100%. And again, the name of this stream is One Test. Is Northern Ireland on an equal footing with England, Scotland and Wales?
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what it is that you're saying. So Ben, I mean, we're stuck in we're stuck, as you say, in the mud. What is the solution, do you think, going forward? I mean, what do people need to do? Is there any advice that you can give to Jeffrey Donaldson, Chris Heaton-Harris, Steve Baker, whoever?
Well, I mean, I've said it. I mean, I would love the DUP to become a national party. It has such fantastic values. At its heart, it believes in the union. It believes in the union in a way the Conservatives don't. It's much more conservative than the Conservative Party. There are phenomenal things, and I think Jeffrey's a great guy. I think he's a really good guy. You know, people will have different views, but I think he's an honest, hardworking, salt of the earth kind of trustworthy guy. He's in a very difficult position, as was Arlene Foster. You know, they're stuck in this difficult position because they're under siege. They're fighting, as politicians, they're fighting an existential threat to the country. They shouldn't have to do that. They should be able to move forward as provincial politicians, confident that the country is safe, that Northern Ireland's place in the country is safe. They can't do it. So they're under siege. They're not able to paint an optimistic vision of Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom because they're permanently fighting this existential threat. And I think the only way to throw off the siege mentality is, as you said, John, is defense. In the best form of defense is to be offensive. Come out of the castle, cross the moat, and take the fight to the enemy. Come to the mainland. There would be huge support for the DUP in England and Scotland. Well, less so in Scotland, perhaps, but certainly in England and many parts of Wales, which, as you know, voted for Brexit on the whole. So that's what I would like to see. I want to see a positive, sovereignly proud, centre-right political force emerge across the United Kingdom. And that's the only way to do it. We've got to, we need a new political force to do it. The DUP's there. It exists. It's got the right values. Throw off the siege mentality. I would give up the rest of my life, John, in this fight if the DUP come to the mainland. I'd probably give up the rest of my life for this fight anyway. But, if I would ally completely and promote the agenda in the United Kingdom, across the United Kingdom. That's what we need to do. We've got to come out of Northern Ireland. We've got to take the fight to Westminster. We've got to threaten these guys. It's the only way to do it.
Absolutely. And I like to say it in this way, Ben, is that, we need to be meaningful and proactive in a way that would defend, protect, and enhance the entire United Kingdom. Is there a way in which that we could get Richard Tice maybe to talk to the DUP to try to align both political aspirations together in order to threaten, as you say, the Tories in their own backyard? Is there a way in which that could be done, do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, Richard's a very close friend, and I'm obviously talking to Richard, and we're always talking, and there is stuff happening, but we need to make sure that we somehow deliver this electoral threat.
Yeah.
To the Labour Party and the Tories. They both have to feel the pressure.
Ben, it would be stupid not to do it because, just at the start of the stream, we're talking about that the Tories are going to get a thrashing at the next general election, and we can't be at the mercy of the Labour Party. So we do have to get up off our knees and fight back. I happen to believe, in talking to people from Scotland, that there is a huge crossover between the people of Northern Ireland and the people of Scotland, and I genuinely believe that if the DUP went and stood there, well, they would have right away. They would have a huge support in Scotland.
Well, the Conservative Party doesn't have a standing in Scotland because they trashed it. No one trusts the Conservative Party in Scotland, and so the DUP would get a much better hearing in Scotland. They get a fantastic hearing in England. They've got to just. Well, I can't say they've got to. They have to do what they feel they have to do. So Jeffrey has to do what he feels he has to do. But it would be wonderful if they could come to the mainland. It would just be wonderful if they could just, and there'd be no shortage of backers, supporters, no shortage of backers. People want it. People want the Tory party out. They're not Tory. They're not centre-right. They're not delivering for the people. They're not low taxation. They're not small state. They are large state interventionist control freaks, and they need to be got rid of. And you know, people like Sir John Redwood, I'm going to call some individuals out. Sir John Redwood, great guy. David Jones, great guy. Marc Francois, great guy. If they're really great guys and they believe in the country, they should now leave the Conservative Party. Why are they still members of the Conservative Party? They tweet brilliant stuff. They say stuff publicly brilliantly, but why aren't they following it up with actions? There's no point having a great set of tweets. You know, you're in the Conservative Party, hold your party to account or ditch them. You know, that's my challenge to all the self-professed chest-thumping members of the ERG. If you really believe in the country, you really want to protect the sovereign integrity of the United Kingdom, leave the Conservative Party. Leave the Conservative Party, join the DUP. Cross the floor and join the DUP. Bang on Jeffrey's door and say you want to join the DUP. Can you imagine the impact that would have, John?
Wouldn't that be something, Ben? Ben, I'm going to finish with the last clip. I mean, I went with our last clip earlier whenever we were talking about, do you still believe that the DUP should be a national party? And I believe that they should be. That's honestly my opinion. So I'm going to play a clip of Jeffrey actually speaking up in Ballymoney in County Antrim, and you were there. And that was, I have the clip here. And I have to say, this is Jeffrey's finest words. And I believe that if he holds solid to these words, and we're coming to a close, I honestly believe that the people that support the DUP, the people that did give their vote to the DUP, well, those votes will be there the next time. So let's listen to Jeffrey, and then we'll come back, Ben, and we'll let you close with your closing comments.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your welcome back to Ballymoney. I'm pleased to be here this evening, and I brought my orange collarette, which I will wear later in the parade. We are standing together to say very clearly that this is not acceptable, and we will not put up with the subjugation of our rights as citizens of the United Kingdom. I want the message to go out from this place that we stand united in our aspiration and in our clear position that the protocol is not acceptable and it must go, and that is the message we need to send out, from that we want and we demand what we were promised, that we're not asking for something we haven't been told we're entitled to. We are not asking for something that we haven't already been told we should have. We're simply asking for that which is our right. So let us continue to stand together, unite in our determination that the protocol must go and our democratic rights as British citizens should be fully restored.
Over to you, Ben.
Well, I think he spoke extremely well there. I believe Jeffrey totally believes it. I think he's a very good man. I think his heart's in the right place and he wants to do the right thing, and he will not stop until the right thing is achieved. That's what I firmly believe, and we should all be helping him, helping Jim Allister to get this ball over the touchline and put it down. And it's not going to come through timidity. We can't do this by being back on our haunches. We've got to move forward. We've got to be on our front foot. We've got to be punching and taking the fight to the enemy. And this is a fight. This is a scrap. You know, anyone who thinks this is some kind of diplomatic, it's not. They're threatening us in our backwater, and we need to threaten right back. And yeah, you know, let's see how it plays out over the next year and a half. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, that's definite. And, you know, again, referring to those words that the protocol must go and the democratic rights of the people of Northern Ireland must be fully restored.
That's very clear. It's very clear.
And those are the words that I can support, you know, and those are the words that every single unionist in Northern Ireland should support. They should be the only words that are coming from our leaders' mouths. That's what I believe. So again, that was just a reminder, Ben, of where that it is where we started, what was promised before the last assembly elections, and I just hope that the DUP hold fast to those words.
There's one other thing I just want to say before I go. And under devolved authority, this is going to be a bit of a digression, but it's not. Under devolved authority, Northern Ireland has the right to make its own corporation tax policy. And it hasn't implemented that right for fear of losing part of the block grant. I think Northern Ireland needs to take control of its own corporation tax policy. It needs to halve corporation tax at least. And I think it's possible to do that without losing any money from the block, what you would otherwise get from the block grant. And that's something, John, that we need to start talking about, because it's an economic fight back as well. You know, we've talked about the political fight. The EU has fought this on economics. There is a way to fight the EU back on economics. And this is something I want to put front and center as well. We've got to slash corporation tax rates in Northern Ireland.
I mean, the last Rishi Sunak, and what is it they call the Chancellor now? What's his name? What's the Chancellor's
Jeremy
name?
Hunt. Yeah.
Jeremy Hunt, that's the one. I mean, they put the corporation tax up, which takes us further away from actually having a unique selling point here in Northern Ireland.
Absolutely. Exactly so you know, businesses are already attracted to the Republic away from Northern Ireland. That's what's done so much damage to Northern Ireland. You've had one hand economically tied behind your back. The protocol now ties the second hand behind your back. So what I say to politicians in Northern Ireland is you have the right to implement an independent corporation tax. There is a way to cut that corporation tax without losing any money from your treasury. And we need to do that in Northern Ireland. It'll pull the economic gravity back to the United Kingdom, away from the Republic, back to Northern Ireland, and therefore back to the United Kingdom. We have to do it.
Yeah. Ben, what was the large company that decided that
AstraZeneca
was AstraZeneca? That's the one. They left they're leaving the UK and they're going to the south, and that's because of the corporation.
That's a wake-up call.
Exactly.
That should be a wake-up call for Jeremy Hunt, but it isn't. I mean, they're asleep at the wheel, these people.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, that's the sort of thing that you were warning of and others were warning of actually before that had happened. And yeah, I mean, that's a very, very good point. Now, the other thing that we do know, and it's on the same subject, is that the EU are moving for tax harmonization. And, you know, again, if we were to lower our corporation tax and be with the United Kingdom, so to speak, well, yeah, the inward investment would come to Northern Ireland, because we did see the years of the Celtic Tiger going on in the south there for a very, very long time, attracting the pharmaceutical industries, the computer industries. You know, I worked in doing a lot of that stuff as a self-employed guy, installing epoxy resin floors and all of those factories for years down there. And I seen what doing the right thing in terms of your taxes, how that it is that you can bring huge amounts of inward investment. We need to do that. That's a very, very good point. Ben, thanks very much yet again for coming along. Just saying to the live chat here is that on Wednesday evening with Jamie Bryson coming on, and it's going to be Good Cop, Bad Cop, where I'm talking about the DUP7 tests, and I'm saying that they're not strong enough. And Jamie's going to explain from his standpoint why that it is that they are strong enough. So really what we're looking to do is that we're looking to ensure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted, so that we don't get this wrong. We can't get this wrong. This is about the United Kingdom, the greatest union that the world has ever seen. And if we're going to save it, well, everyone needs to understand that we can't do the wrong thing at this stage. Ben Habib, thanks very much for coming along. And
thank you, John.
As I say, you're a great friend of Northern Ireland, and I look forward to the next time. And yes, there's a lot of people, Ben, that is with you in this fight and will continue in this fight and won't be backing down. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
So they tell us from Irish America, the EU, the Irish government, some within the Westminster Parliament, they tell us that the Belfast Agreement, it has to be protected in all shapes and fashions. It's of paramount importance that that agreement must be protected. So therefore, people, that is their Achilles heel. That is the thing that we need to threaten. That is the thing that we need to take down. We need to destroy their precious agreement, because without unionist support, that agreement is over. Are we asking to return back to the bad old days? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You see, you can be against an appeasement process and you can be still for peace. That Belfast appeasement has been working for the IRA terrorists in where that in 1994, late 1994, there was talks with the British government. And those talks would have went on for a while, in fact, over a 4-year period. But in 1996, the IRA let off a bomb in the Docklands in Canary Wharf, causing £500 million worth of damage. And that was the IRA tactically seeking to create what we now know to be an appeasement process. And ever since that point going forward, whether it be bombs in the Docklands, Canary Wharf, whether it be Northern Bank raids, whether it be gathering information that is useful to terrorists, whether that was killing people in 2015, one in the markets and one in Short Strand, and don't let anybody tell you that that was not the IRA conglomerate linked to Gerry Adams' Sinn Féin group, because it was. You know, whether it was that, whether it was the guns being out on the streets in 2019 and again in 2020, one for Mr. Rooney, Lower Falls, D Company of the IRA, with their guns shooting over a coffin. And where's Simon Hoare shouting about those things? You see, it didn't matter. It constantly didn't matter. And they were only a few things that I just mentioned there. It didn't matter what the IRA done, when they done it, how they done it. It didn't matter if they murdered people. It didn't matter if they blew places up. It did not matter if they even, just quite lately, where they make rules in Stormont and they don't abide by those rules, where they get a British state funeral, all because to ensure that you don't threaten those who would come out onto the streets in violence again. And that's exactly what has happened from the inception of the talks about talks, going through to the Belfast Agreement, running right through to today's date. That Belfast Agreement and every single thing that flows from it, it doesn't work for British Unionists here in Northern Ireland. And you know, all the protocol rallies in the world, all the standing on stages in the world will not get the same results as threatening and pulling down and insisting that you're not going back anywhere near that Belfast Agreement until that there's a level playing field, until that we have our rights reinstated here in Northern Ireland, and we can continue on building reconciliation with the ordinary decent people of Northern Ireland from that day going forward. But until that day, stability can never occur in this country, because, you know, when you enhance one at the expense of another, well, you see, you get resentment, and no process that is ever produced real reconciliation has ever been built in such a way